Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive with us.
Hi, everybody.
This time, we're going to be looking at someone that I think a lot of people already know quite a bit about.
Oh, yeah, definitely a household name.
Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, Jackie O.
Jackie O.
But we're going to be looking at her Wikipedia page, and as always, trying to see if we can find some interesting little details or,
Yeah, some things.
some interesting stuff.
But you might not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, why don't we jump right in? So, like I was saying, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, most people think of her as very stylish
Well, for sure.
First Lady.
And, of course,
Yeah.
Tied to the tragedy of JFK.
Yeah, the tragedy of JFK.
Right.
But there's so much more. I mean, we're going to go all the way back to her childhood.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all, privilege and roses.
Right.
Her parents actually had a very tumultuous divorce.
Yeah, very public.
Very public at
No
the time,
doubt.
which is interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And they had some financial struggles as well.
Right.
Not all,
Not exactly.
peaches and cream.
Yeah, and that, apparently deeply affected her. It contributed to her more introspective nature.
Oh, absolutely. I think those early experiences, even though there was privilege, even though there was wealth, these kind of cracks in this facade of this perfect life, I think really, contributed to her resilience and her independent spirit that we see later.
That's so interesting to think about. And also her stepfather, I believe, gifted her mother a 1940 Ford Deluxe convertible.
Wow.
Which she learned to drive in. And
how cool.
That car eventually ended up in the Crumply family collection.
I love these little details.
I know, it's so funny.
Great. Let's fix this.
It's just this reminder that these figures who seem larger than life also had these ordinary moments.
Yeah.
You can imagine a young Jackie, behind the wheel of that Ford, just, cruising around thinking about, what her life would become.
Yeah. Or, driving to school or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
So we, before she was the Jackie O that everybody knows, she actually was a journalist.
Yeah.
She worked as an inquiring camera girl.
I love that.
For the Washington Times Herald.
For the Washington Times Herald.
Can you imagine? That's amazing.
So she was going around and posing, witty questions to people just on the street.
It really does challenge our kind of perception of her, doesn't it? I mean, we think of her as, this very elegant, stylish figure, but she was out there, pounding the pavement, talking to everyday people.
Yeah, she was getting her hands dirty.
Yeah.
And she even interviewed a young Tricia Nixon.
Oh, wow.
Who, of course, became a first daughter herself later.
A future first daughter.
Isn't that?
Isn't that interesting? So you have this future first lady interviewing a future first daughter. I mean, what are the odds?
What are the odds of that? It's so wild. And it just shows you that she, she had this ambition and she was already kind of...
Drive to be in the...
Yeah, she wanted to be there.
In the mix. She wanted to be involved.
Okay.
And then, of course, she becomes this, fashion icon.
Oh, of course. I mean, who can forget the pillbox hat? The tailored suits, the gloves. I mean, just
the sunglasses.
Oh my gosh.
The oversized sunglasses.
The oversized sunglasses.
She was just she oozed style.
Right.
Oleg Cassini designed most of her wardrobe.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about the fact that, amidst her love for French couture, which we all know about, she really championed American designers.
Yeah.
And that was very savvy, I think, because it really showed a sense of national pride.
Yeah, and kind of put American designers on the map a little bit more.
Absolutely.
And it said she spent more on clothes than JFK's presidential salary.
That's amazing.
It's pretty wild.
It's amazing.
So another thing that she was really, passionate about was restoring the White House.
Oh, yeah. This is a great example of her, using her platform for something really meaningful.
Yeah, and she even, she raised funds for it. She actually published a guidebook to the White House to help raise funds.
That's amazing.
Which is amazing.
I love that.
I didn't realize she did that.
It's really a testament to her passion for history and for preservation. And I think it speaks to a broader theme in her life. She wasn't just interested in, the superficial aspects of things. She really wanted to delve deeper.
Right.
She was involved in saving Lafayette Square in D.C., She even advocated for the preservation of ancient Egyptian temples.
No way.
That were threatened by the Aswan Dam. I mean, talk about a global perspective.
I know, that's amazing. I had no idea about that.
Yeah, she really had this global awareness of history and culture. and a deep commitment to preserving the past.
That's so cool. And speaking of global awareness, she also took a trip to India and Pakistan with her sister Lee Radziwill in 1962.
Yeah.
And the Pakistani president gifted her a horse.
How cool is that?
I
mean, it really shows, the kind of impact she had. She was a true cultural ambassador.
Yeah.
Fluent in multiple languages,
Yeah.
deeply knowledgeable about history, and just really able to connect with people from all over the world.
I love that. And sadly, she also had to deal with some very tragic things.
Oh, absolutely.
She and JFK actually lost an infant son.
Yeah.
Patrick.
Right.
And
Devastating.
Devastating, yeah, just a few days after his birth.
Yeah, and I think it's impossible to fully comprehend the depth of her grief, but it's important to acknowledge that this tragedy, I think, ultimately strengthened her resolve.
Yeah.
And her independence.
And I mean, obviously, we all know about the assassination of JFK,
right.
which is just
horrific,
awful to think about. And it's hard to imagine what she went through. But she seems to have kind of, she was just so strong through it all.
Yeah, she had this incredible inner strength that allowed her to navigate those incredibly difficult times and to emerge as, the symbol of resilience and grace.
And she was very protective of her children and of JFK's legacy after his death.
Absolutely. She took legal action to prevent the publication of a book that contained, personal details about her and her family.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to her fierce determination to control the narrative surrounding her family and to protect their privacy, especially in the face of such a public tragedy.
And then she, a few years later, she married Aristotle Onassis.
Right, which was very controversial.
Hugely controversial.
At the time.
But
I think we can understand why she made that choice. She was seeking security and privacy for herself and her children.
Right.
A way to escape the constant scrutiny and the fear that had become a part of her life after the assassination.
She probably just wanted to get away from it all.
Absolutely. It was about survival.
Yep.
It was about creating a new life for herself and for her children.
So she also had a career after that. She actually became a book editor.
Yes, she did.
Which is so interesting to me.
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You think of her as this fashion icon, as this first lady, but then she goes on to have this, very successful career.
Yeah.
As a book editor for Viking Press and Doubleday.
And she worked on a wide range of books, which is really cool.
Yeah, it shows her intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
And her love of literature.
Yeah.
I mean, she even edited the Cartoon History of the Universe.
Oh,
which is...
That's so funny.
Kind of amazing to think about.
Yeah.
Right?
And she never stopped, advocating for things that she believed in.
Oh, absolutely.
She fought to save Grand Central Terminal from being demolished.
A New York City landmark.
Yeah.
It's still standing today, thanks in part to her efforts.
And she fought for the preservation of Central Park. So she was very, activist in that way, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think these efforts really showcase a different side of her activism.
Yeah.
One that's often overshadowed by her more glamorous roles. But she was deeply committed to preserving the history and the culture of her city and her country.
Yeah, and it makes you think about... we've already learned so much about her. What else will we find out as we go on through her life?
Right, exactly. And she did all of this while navigating the constant scrutiny of the public eye. I mean, can you imagine?
Yeah. I mean, she always seemed to handle everything with such grace and dignity.
Right. She had this incredible ability to maintain her composure and her sense of self amidst all that pressure.
So what stands out to you the most about her story so far? I mean, we've just scratched the surface, but...
I think for me, it's the contrast between her public persona and her private struggles.
Right.
She was this icon of style and elegance, yet she faced, these profound personal losses and challenges most of us can only imagine.
It's kind of amazing to think about. And she was so much more than just a first lady.
Oh, absolutely.
She was this complex,
multifaceted
woman who navigated life with grace and determination.
Exactly. And we've only just begun to explore her story. There's so much more to uncover as we delve deeper into her life after JFK.
So stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into the life of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. We'll explore her later years, her evolving identity, and the legacy she left behind.
So we were just talking about, Jackie's strength in the face of, such public tragedy and the scrutiny.
It's really quite remarkable when you think about it, how she was able to just hold it together during those times.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone's cut out for that level of, I mean, can you imagine just constantly being watched?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she understood the power of image, but she also had this incredible inner strength that allowed her to kind of stay grounded amidst all the chaos.
Right, and like you said, the power of image. But she was able to actually kind of stay true to herself, it seemed like, at least, from what, yeah. And it challenges our assumptions about what it means to be strong.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's not always about, outward displays of forcefulness. Sometimes it's about that quiet dignity.
Yeah.
That resilience, the ability to keep moving forward, even when life throws you these curveballs.
Totally. And speaking of, those curveballs, let's rewind a little bit, because I think it's really interesting to look at some of her formative experiences that may have contributed to that, that inner strength.
Yeah.
And there's a really telling detail in the Wikipedia page about her childhood. Her father actually nicknamed her the most beautiful daughter a man ever had.
Interesting.
Which,
that's sweet.
It's sweet, but it's also, it reveals something about their relationship.
Yeah.
Obviously he adored her, and that kind of affirmation, especially during a tumultuous childhood,
Yeah.
when her parents got divorced.
Right. I mean, that could have a profound impact on her self-esteem,
Yeah.
and her sense of worth.
Makes you wonder how those early experiences shaped her confidence and her ability to, handle those pressures of public life.
Right, because she was thrust into the spotlight at a very young age.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she was named Debutante of the Year by a Hearst columnist while she was still in college.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
And that kind of attention, I mean, that could be overwhelming for some people.
Totally.
But she seemed to take it all in stride.
She had this, inner confidence.
Yeah.
And she wasn't just coasting on her looks or anything like that. She had a genuine thirst for knowledge.
Oh, absolutely.
Her junior year abroad, she studied in Grenoble and at the Sorbonne.
Right, which speaks to her intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
And her desire to kind of, experience different cultures.
Yeah, and she graduated from George Washington University with a degree in French literature.
Yeah, I mean, her fluency in French,
Yeah.
During those trips with JFK wasn't just for show.
Right.
She had, a solid academic foundation.
Yeah.
A genuine love of learning.
Yeah, and then, so there's this little interesting tidbit that she actually was a junior editor briefly at Vogue.
I did not know that.
The managing editor actually told her to quit after only one day.
Seriously.
Because she thought Jackie was too on to be single.
Oh, my gosh.
And needed to focus on finding a husband.
Wow. Can you believe that?
Isn't that?
Talk about outdated societal expectations.
I know.
Right.
It's just crazy to think about someone like Jackie Kennedy being told that she's...
Yeah, that she's not good enough.
Yeah.
For Vogue.
For Vogue.
It's just incredible.
It's crazy.
It really highlights those societal pressures that women faced.
Yeah.
At the time.
At that time.
They were expected to, find a husband, settle down.
Yeah, get married, have kids. That was it.
Right, exactly. And it just shows you that, Jackie had this independent spirit. She wasn't going to let that experience define her.
No.
She left that job and went on to pursue,
she became
her career in journalism.
Yeah, the inquiring camera girl.
Yeah, exactly, which we were talking about earlier.
And remember, one of the people she interviewed during that time was Tricia Nixon.
Tricia Nixon, a future first daughter.
It's just these little connections that make exploring history so fascinating.
It really is.
Right.
Okay, so let's go back to her time as First Lady, because we touched on the White House restoration project.
Yeah, one of her,
But it's really interesting to kind of go a little bit deeper into that, because she really had this passion for history.
Oh, she did.
And the Wikipedia page really gets into that.
Yeah, she wasn't just redecorating. She was driven by this desire to, restore the White House to its former glory.
Yeah.
To preserve its, historical significance.
Right. It was more than just aesthetics.
Exactly.
And it said that she even tracked down furnishings and artifacts.
Oh, wow.
That had been removed by previous presidents.
It was like she was piecing together this historical puzzle.
I love that.
And she was determined to get it right. Right. And she even persuaded Congress to pass a law declaring that White House furnishings would belong to the Smithsonian.
Oh, wow.
So they would be preserved.
That's amazing.
For the future.
Talk about foresight. I mean,
I know.
She really understood the importance of preserving that cultural heritage.
Yeah. And she also really wanted to bring the White House to life for the American people.
Oh, absolutely.
Remember that televised tour that she gave?
Yes.
That millions of people watched and she actually won an Emmy for?
I love that story. It shows her ability to connect with people.
Yeah.
A deeper level.
Yeah.
You know, she wasn't just a figurehead. She was actively
Right.
shaping the public's perception.
Of the White House and its history.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just limited to the White House, you know, her trips to France and India, Pakistan.
Well, he was a true global ambassador.
Yeah.
You know, she charmed diplomats and dignitaries.
I read that Khrushchev actually said that he wanted to shake Jackie's hand before President Kennedy's. I mean, she just had this effect on people.
She really did. She had this incredible charisma.
Yeah.
An international appeal. I mean, she was a force to be reckoned with, even on the world stage.
Totally. And then, of course, we have that, you know, that heart-wrenching period after the death of their infant son, Patrick.
Yes, a tragedy that I think deeply affected both her and President Kennedy.
It's hard to imagine, you know,
it is.
What that must have been like for them.
Absolutely.
And then just a few years later, the assassination.
I know. It's almost hard to even talk about.
It's hard to even fathom.
But those images of Jackie, you know, in her bloodstained pink suit, I mean, they're seared into our collective memory.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
They're iconic.
It's a moment in history that continues to haunt us.
Yeah.
And yet, her composure
I know.
throughout that ordeal was truly remarkable.
Almost superhuman.
Right. She somehow managed to maintain her dignity and strength.
Yeah.
While the world watched in shock and horror.
I think she understood the weight of history in that moment, you know, and she knew that she had to project this image of strength and resilience for a nation in mourning.
Absolutely. And she played a key role in planning President Kennedy's funeral. You know, she modeled it after Abraham Lincoln's service.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, she recognized the need to honor his legacy.
Right.
And to provide a sense of closure.
Closure.
For a grieving nation.
And in the aftermath, you know, the Camelot myth really took hold.
Yeah.
Do you remember that interview she gave to Life magazine?
Yes.
Where she compared their time in the White House to King Arthur's court?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's a fascinating glimpse into her mindset during that period.
Yeah.
I mean, she was consciously crafting a narrative.
Yes.
Right? A way to preserve the idealism and hope that her husband represented.
And it worked. I mean, the Camelot era,
it
became like synonymous with the Kennedy presidency.
Right.
Conjuring up these images of, you know, glamour and optimism and lost innocence.
It's a powerful example of how history is often shaped by those who tell the story.
Yeah.
And Jackie was a master storyteller.
Totally.
She understood the power of narrative and used it to protect her husband's legacy and to create a sense of meaning out of tragedy.
And she continued to shape that narrative even after JFK's death.
Yeah.
You know, she was so fiercely protective of her children and his legacy.
Absolutely.
And her decision to marry Aristotle Onassis 5 years later.
Right.
It was so controversial.
Hugely controversial.
But you have to remember the context.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
She was looking for security and privacy for herself and her children.
Right. She needed to escape the constant scrutiny.
Yeah.
And the fear that had become a part of her life after the assassination.
Yeah. And we forget that even the most public figures still have private lives.
Of course.
And those private lives are often, you know, more complicated than we realize.
Way more complex than we can even imagine.
Her decision to marry Onassis wasn't just about romance or anything like that. It was about survival.
Exactly.
It was about creating a new life. Yeah.
Fresh start.
Yeah, for herself and her children.
And, you know, it was a decision that ultimately allowed her to regain control of her narrative and to kind of step out of the shadow of her first husband's legacy.
It's incredible to think about everything that she went through.
I know.
And how she was able to...
Mind-boggling.
Keep going.
Right. And to keep reinventing herself.
Yeah.
She had this, you know, seemingly inexhaustible well of strength and resilience.
Totally. But even Jackie, you know, with all of her strength, couldn't escape the tragedies that seemed to follow her family.
Yeah, the loss of her brother-in-law, Robert Kennedy, in 1968.
Yeah.
I mean, another devastating blow.
I know. I mean, to lose a second brother-in-law to assassination.
I know.
It's just like...
unimaginable.
It's like hard to use.
And it's like, you know, those wounds from JFK's death were just ripped open all over again.
Right.
You know, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Think about it.
And she was able to just kind of, you know, keep going.
She navigated those dark times, and she continued to build a life for herself and for her children.
She moved to New York City.
Yeah.
Started a new career as a book editor.
Right.
And, you know, she kept advocating for the causes that she believed in.
Right. It's like she found a new sense of purpose.
Yeah.
In those later years, a way to honor the past.
Yeah.
While also embracing the future.
And her work as a book editor, You know, it really speaks to her intellectual curiosity and her love of literature.
It does.
I mean, it's so fascinating to think about her editing works like The Cartoon History of the Universe.
Right.
It just shows this playful side to her that we don't often see.
It's true. We often forget that behind the icon there was a real person
Right.
with, a wide range of interests.
Yeah.
And a sense of humor.
A sense of humor. Yeah. And she never stopped, advocating for the things she believed in.
No, she didn't.
Her efforts to save Grand Central Terminal.
Yes.
And to fight for the preservation of Central Park just really highlighted her commitment to the arts and culture and history.
It really does. And I think those efforts showcase a different side of her activism.
Yeah.
One that's often overlooked.
Yeah.
She wasn't just interested in preserving the past. She was also invested in shaping the future.
The future, yeah.
Of her city and her country.
And she never lost sight of the importance of family.
No. She was a devoted mother.
Yeah.
To Caroline and John Jr., and later a loving grandmother.
It just makes you remember that even people who seem larger than life are still human.
Right.
They still have their own dreams and struggles and triumphs.
Absolutely.
Jackie's life was just this tapestry of experiences,
Well,
woven together with, tragedy and resilience and
an unwavering commitment.
Yeah.
To the things she believed in.
Totally. And it's just amazing how she was able to navigate all of that with, grace and intelligence.
She did.
Yeah.
And with this quiet determination.
Yeah.
That continues to inspire us today.
So as we kind of move into this final chapter of Jackie's story, what are your thoughts? I mean, what aspects of her life after JFK really resonate with you?
I think for me, it's her ability to reinvent herself, to find new meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
After experiencing such profound loss.
Yeah.
It speaks to the resilience of the human spirit.
Totally.
Her ability to keep growing and evolving, even in the face of adversity.
Yeah, and it also highlights the importance of allowing public figures to have their own personal space,
Right.
and to make their own choices without judgment.
Absolutely. I mean, Jackie's life was constantly under scrutiny, but she never let that stop her from pursuing her passions and creating a life that felt authentic to her.
Exactly. And her narrative is one that continues to fascinate and inspire us even decades after her death.
It's a story that speaks to the enduring power of grace, strength, and, the human spirit's capacity for resilience and reinvention.
There's still one chapter left in Jackie's story, though.
Yes, there is.
Stay with us as we explore her final years, her legacy, and the impact she continues to have on our world. Okay, so we've talked about Jackie's childhood, her time as First Lady, and, how she kind of navigated all the craziness of the public eye and the tragedy that she faced.
It's incredible how, after all of that, she still had this drive, to create a life for herself.
Yeah, and she really did it on her own terms.
Absolutely. She didn't retreat from the world.
Right.
She embraced it, but in a way that felt very authentic to her.
And I think that mystery that kind of surrounded her, it almost grew even more in her later years.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes her so intriguing, right?
Right.
She never let the public completely in.
Right.
And so it allowed people to kind of project their own interpretations onto her.
Yeah, and she really became this icon.
She became this symbol.
Yeah.
For so many different things, hope and dreams and anxieties.
Right, and it transcended politics and fashion.
Absolutely.
I mean, her love for the arts and culture was so genuine.
It was, and it had a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It inspired a whole generation to engage with history and literature and the world around them.
Yeah, she was like this elegant ambassador for intellectual curiosity,
It was.
encouraging people to explore new ideas and expand their horizons.
Absolutely. And I think we can't talk about Jackie without talking about her impact on women.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she redefined what it meant to be a first lady.
Yeah.
She broke free from those traditional constraints.
Right.
And she pursued her own passions.
She was intelligent, she was stylish, she was independent.
Exactly. She was all of those things.
All at the same time.
And she did it with grace and dignity.
And it wasn't just about the image she projected.
No, it was about the choices she made, the causes she championed.
Right.
The way she carried herself through life's ups and downs.
Yeah, her resilience is pretty remarkable. When you think about, everything she went through.
Losing 2 husbands.
Yeah.
The constant scrutiny of the media, the pressure of living up to the Camelot myth.
And yet she never seemed to lose herself.
Right. She found ways to channel her grief, her passion, her intelligence into these meaningful pursuits.
Right. Her work as a book editor, her advocacy for historic preservation, her dedication to her children. I mean,
And it all speaks to her strength
yeah.
and her commitment to living a life of purpose.
And her legacy is one that I think continues to inspire us today.
It does.
You know, she reminds us that even in the face of adversity, we can choose to define our own narratives,
Right.
to embrace our passions, to leave our mark on the world.
And to be both strong and vulnerable, elegant and down to earth, a public figure and a private individual.
Exactly. And it's that complexity, I think, that makes her so fascinating.
It does. It's that blend of seemingly contradictory qualities that makes her so enduring.
And it's also a reminder that there's always more to discover.
Always.
You know, more to learn.
More to appreciate.
Yeah.
About the people and events that shape our world.
Totally. And you know, even someone as well known as Jackie Kennedy, I feel like she still holds some surprises.
Oh, she does.
And insights that can enrich our understanding of history and human nature.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what is your biggest takeaway?
I think for me, it's the importance of embracing complexity.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Jackie's story is full of contradictions, of light and shadow, of public and private struggles.
Right.
And it's in those gray areas that we find the most profound truths about her and about ourselves.
I completely agree. It's a reminder that life isn't always black and white.
No, it's not.
That people are multifaceted. And that there's beauty in the messiness of it all.
And the journey of discovery is often just as rewarding as the destination.
Well said. So we'll leave you with one final thought to ponder. If Jackie Kennedy Onassis were alive today, what causes do you think she'd be championing?
Oh, that's a great question.
How would she be using her voice and her influence to make a difference in the world?
Given her passion for the arts, history, and social justice, one can only imagine the impact she would be making.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. We hope you gained some new insights, sparked your curiosity, and maybe even felt inspired by her extraordinary journey. Until next time.
Tell us what you think about this episode. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.